everyone, and welcome you to the webinar brought to you by the Soltesz Institute. My name is Viktoria Soltesz and I'm the founder of the Institute, and we aim for an ethical and transparent payment and banking setup and industry, and that's what we are bringing you, the latest innovation news and hearing the latest trend from the industry professionals. I truly believe that there are so much of a knowledge hidden in different professional minds, which we need to bring up to the surface, and we need to talk about a lot of aspects of payments and banking, because that's the only way that we can bring closer the users and the fintech companies and discuss all the news and the developments, what affects us in the industry. So today, the webinar is going to be a very, very interesting discussion presented by David. Today, we're going to talk about small markets, which can bring big opportunities and big possibilities for startups. And David is here with me, who is in the industry for numerous amount of years, and he has a lot of real case stories and real life examples that what are the different payment and banking challenges, what startups are experiencing, or even when your company is at scale up stage. So there are going to be a lot of things to discuss with David. Welcome you, David, to here in the webinar, and thank you very much for sharing all of your wisdom with us. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself, and how is the payment and banking industries even affecting you, and how do you see that in your everyday world, just to get to know you a little bit better?
Hello, Victoria. Thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me. And it's always a pleasure to meet with you and speak with you, and especially with our audience. So I will try to very, very briefly talk about myself, how I was involved in financial technologies and in banking involved. So my name is David Kikwidze. I'm a chairman of the FinTech Association of Georgia. At the same time, I'm an Open Banking Committee member on behalf of TBC Bank. TBC Bank is one of the largest commercial bank in our country in Georgia. And also at the current stage, I'm a business school dean at Alta University. So this is my very briefly personal information. So how I was involved in banking sector, especially in fintech, it starts many years ago, approximately 20 years ago, when I first started working at Bank of Georgia. Bank of Georgia also, it's one of the largest commercial banks in our country. And from the time till now, I'm fully involved in banking sector, in financial system, and from the banking now I am turned on to the financial technologies, and I can say that I am addicted about the fintech, and almost every day I have the communication almost with every fintech person, with regulators, with commercial banks, with other stakeholders, and almost every day we're trying to enhance fintech sector in our country, help to develop this fintech startups in our country. Also, we have some ongoing projects, of course, including some trainings, including licensing projects, including communication with international partners, and so on. This is briefly about me.
Nice. So you've got all the experience regarding the fintech aspects, regarding to the startup aspects, and the banking experience. Yeah. So I think I'm asking the questions from the right person when I'm picking your brain about the problems and issues what we have in our industry, yeah. And I'm very curious. What are you going to tell us? Usually we are collecting questions from the audience. So today we're going to have the same structure. The audience can send us different questions before we start the webinar, just to have a nice structure to the conversation. So today we collected a couple of questions for you, but if you have anything to add, please feel free to do so. These questions are really just to guide the conversation and give a nice skeleton to the discussion, but please share your real life experience with us as well, in case that something comes up in your mind in the beginning. So the first question is actually a very common one, and I have seen this a lot in my professional experience as well, that there are a lot of companies which are doing very well locally. They have the relevant banks and payment providers. They don't even think it's an issue. They have a lot of clients, and then they want to expand globally because that's the obvious next thing to do, right? Expand outside of your borders, and then you face the very obvious problems, the banking, the payments. What do you think? How we can avoid these very common traps when we are expanding globally and we are facing the local payment methods and we are facing the rejections of the local banks? What is your experience? First of all, what are the most common traps when we are expanding globally? And secondly, of course, how we can overcome that as a new starting business? What do you think? What have you seen?
So I would say the first mistake when the companies trying to expand their business and in the globally, and first mistake we are made, it's a wrong analysis of the country, because every company trying to expand their business in bigger market, where is much more opportunities, much more customers, much more maybe technologies, and much more maybe GDP as well, GDP per capita as well, and much more income from the society. But still, it's not enough. The big market is not always big opportunities. Yes, of course, big market is a big amount of customers, big amount of transactions and so on. But still, there is some challenges which every company have to think before they enter to the market. And first mistake, and the most common mistakes in this regard, I think it's a market analysis. And there is a lot of tools by which we can, for example, trying to analyze the market. What is the GDP? And maybe one of the most important moments in this regard, when we are talking about the financial technologies and payments and banking system and so on, the most important moment is the culture, maybe I would say, the society culture, how they are using the financial tools, how they are using for example, credit products, other banking instruments, other, financial instruments and so on. And only after this analysis, we can start thinking, should we enter in this market or not? Also, there is some moment when many companies did not analyzing the, for example, bureaucracy and status of this country. Because when we are entering in the country, mostly we need to get the license to operate in this country. And getting the license is one of the most challenging moments, because, for example, in post-Soviet Union countries, which are one of the most biggest and interesting countries for all fintech companies, especially from the Georgia, and many companies was trying to enter in post-Soviet countries. Most common challenge in this regard was the licensing process, because these countries very high bureaucracy in this process. So many companies did not recognize this, and they started the operations without any concerns, and they was thinking that they get the license in these countries is very easy. They need maybe just some communication and a proper person and so on, but still it's not enough. We have a lot of examples when the Georgian companies was starting to enter in Uzbekistan market, also Kazakhstan market, but still it was the problem after they starting operations, and they have to after a little period they have to quit from this operation from these countries and leave these countries and get back to another ideas in other countries. This is I would say the most common traps when the fintech companies and financial organizations starting to enter in international countries and face some challenges in this regard.
I think you mentioned a lot about the fintech companies expansion. And of course, when you're expanding to new jurisdictions, it's very important to get the license and, be regulated with your new jurisdiction as well. But when it comes to the users, what would you say what are the major pitfalls? And it could be even from a fintech perspective, when you're going to a new jurisdiction and you want to have, for example, correspondent accounts locally, or you want to agree with the local banking ecosystem to support your fintech operation, agree with the local partners for, microfinance or buy now, pay later kind of products. What do you think, what are those very common pitfalls when it comes to global expansion? So it's not necessarily from the fintech perspective of serving the local market, but also be the customer of the new market. You mentioned a lot about the cultural differences. And to be honest with you, I have seen that a lot with my clients as well, that let's say there is an e-commerce business. They're very successful, let's say, in even sticking to the country, let's say in Georgia, in that region. And then they are going to the larger market and they want to target the US. But in US, there are different payment methods. They have, for example, 2D instead of the 3D on the cards. Then they have local banking rails, which is ACH. So it needs a bit more planning and adopting the local payment methods. What do you think that in your experience, other than the obvious, which is the local payment method, and see how you can serve those local customers? Is there any other kind of pitfalls that we need to plan for? Obviously, expanding the payment and banking plan and strategy to the local markets. But is there any other common traps when you're expanding your operation globally, and then you need to deal with the local payment partners and banking partners?
Of course, for sure. It's well known that the fintech companies is very high dependent on the commercial banks because they need some accounts, they need some services from the commercial banks, for example, some acquiring and other services by which they can operate in the field. Yeah, I can talk about by Georgian experience and Georgian example. A few years ago, if we will talk about the competition of the fintech companies and the commercial banks, maybe 10 years ago, it was very high competition between fintech companies and commercial banks because the commercial banks was looking at the fintechs as a competitors. And in this regard, they was trying to avoid the partnership with the fintech companies because it was for them, it's some kind of revenue cutting because the fintech companies was very rapidly and very speedily, I would say, and very rapidly developing and growing up. But after the development of fintech sector, the commercial banks looks at the fintechs as not a competitor but as a partner. And now in European market, in US market, we can see the picture when the commercial banks and fintech companies is very actively cooperating. And in this process, every stage and every counterparty taking his revenue, taking his advantages and so on. But there is still countries, for example, Georgia, by the way, and not only Georgia, but also the, once again, post-Soviet countries, some Asian countries as well. There is still challenges in this regard because the commercial banks now are looking at the fintech companies as competitors. And still now in Georgia, we have very problematic picture when we started cooperating with commercial bank. And for example, the fintech companies goes to commercial bank and asking them to open account and take some services. Commercial bank looking at this process very, very carefully, and they are not very open for this cooperation and partnership. They are asking a lot of documents, so including AML documentation, other procedures and politics and so on. So it takes a lot of time from the fintech companies to prepare all necessary documentations, all proper, politics and so other documentation to submit at commercial bank. And only after that, when you submitting the documents, it's not the final decision that the commercial banks will open the account. It's depending on their own decision, and they, after they submitted documentation, they can just give you answer that your company is under high risk or something else, I don't know, and just rejected your application and do not open the account. And in other hand, if you do not have account in commercial bank, you cannot go to the NBG and submit applications for the licensing. So it means that it's very common problem. It's not only in Georgia, but I think it's in very much more countries. So firstly, very firstly, we have to very carefully review the market, analyze the market. What is the culture? What is the situation? What is the population? What is the technology adoption, and so on? And of course, secondly, before operating, start finding and searching the local partner. Local partner is a commercial bank. Without commercial bank, it's impossible to create any service, because still now there is a high dependency on the commercial banking services. I think it's in all around the world, not only in Georgia or some post-Soviet Union countries.
Exactly. It's all over the world, really. You can't open a bank account, you can't start trading, then it doesn't matter how good is your idea or how much even funding you received or how innovative your technology is. Actually, you won't be able to start even the operation. So this is, as you said, it's an international problem. It's not just locally, but anywhere. And this is also what we have seen, that internationally, it's a huge challenge trying to go into new markets, entering new jurisdictions. And many times that the tax advisor is telling the company that, okay, you go here, you go there, you incorporate the company here, there, and the tax is going to be optimized. But no one is really talking about the problems that how am I going to open a bank account, and how do I bring back the money to the headquarters when I need to pay the salaries and the suppliers and whatnot, just to maintain the business. But we have seen a lot of new changes when it comes to fintech, I think, during 2024. And I think these innovations never stop. So the next question is these changes as well. That what do you think, what was the most surprising change in the payment and banking industry during 2024? And it's an interesting one, because they also ask, how did it affect your thinking? Do you see fintech differently than you did in, let's say, 2023? Or what was the outcome of these changes in your way of approach?
Victoria, you know better than me that the fintech sector is very rapidly developing in all around the world. So it's too hard to say, I don't know, some one example, but I will try to answer on this question regarding to my country, yes, Georgia. In Georgia as well, we are very actively developing. We have a lot of payment methods, payment systems, and a lot of companies, by the way, payment service providers, which are almost every day trying to adopt innovative payment products and so on. But still, in 2024, I would say that one of the most exciting news from my country, it was the adoption of the open banking. So maybe you know that the open banking project in our country was started in 2020 after COVID period, if I'm not wrong. And till now, we get some regulations, services. All commercial banks has already issued the APIs of different services, but till now, there was not adoption. So no fintech company was trying to adopt the open banking in their infrastructure. And now we have the company which started operating based on open banking. They introduced the QR payments based on the open banking, and I think it was very first step. Of course, it's not very some kind of high innovation or something else, but for our country, I think it's a very first step to really new development, a really new stage of development of the not only payment system, but in general the fintech sector. And very near future, of course, I am expecting that the other companies will introduce new innovations regarding to open banking and other services. And finally, I would like to say that I'm sure you know that the Apple is going to introduce new payment method via name drop by the phone. So I'm very actively waiting for this news and waiting when we can adopt this method in our country.
You think it's going to be good or bad?
No.
I've seen ideas from both ends that it's going to be the best thing ever, or of course, when you're a fintech company, it could be a huge threat. What do you think?
Yes, definitely.
Is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? What do you think?
I think it will be good. Of course, it definitely should be good because it's a very simple and very easy method of payments, not only payments, but transfers. And it can be adopted in every type of financial product, in every type of trading, every type of, different sectors. So I think that it will be good. Of course, definitely will be good.
Let's see about the prices as well, because if you grab the mono, for example, when you've got a new app and you're launching on the App Store, or you want to have some payments in-app payments, it could be quite pricey. And the biggest argument against these embedded pricing payment methods is that it's so expensive that the app does not even have a chance. Meanwhile, if you are using external payment providers, then the fees can be actually lower. And I think this is also one of the biggest arguments with open banking as well, that they can be the challengers for the traditional card payments because it's cheaper, it's faster, there is no chargeback. So all the fintech innovations now, it looks like that it goes to benefit of course, the users, as it should be. But then there are the biggest questions is that if there's a big giant who is coming in with Apple Pay and then they already have all the users under their belt, how much is going to be the charge, which is going to be, maybe just hindering some businesses.
This is a competition, yeah? This is a competition. Why is needed competition? We need competition to cut costs and cut expenses and reduce expenses. Why the technology company became to fintech companies? Because they have more flexibility to introduce innovative services and products instead of traditional banking services. This is, I think, very important, and we have to go through this period. And I think we are now in this era where the financial products and services very, very soon will be much cheaper and more flexible.
As it should be, benefiting us, right? That's the whole point. Exactly. What do you think? What high risk brings on the table? Because we have seen these high risk industries such as gaming or pharmaceuticals. They are bringing new creative thinking because many times, the card schemes do not want to work with them or it's very expensive. So that was one of the reasons that, for example, merchants also like to integrate now open banking, because then you don't have to follow the Visa and MasterCard rules that closely and that particularly as you would do with, for example, open banking. What do you think? Is there any other lessons that the payment industry can learn from sectors like gaming or pharmaceuticals that have dealt with these high regulatory challenges? This is actually a question, and I think it's a very nice aspect because, every time that there's a high-risk industry and the banking and payment industry is trying to reject those sectors, there is always a new way, there's always a creative alternative popping up. So what do you think? Is there any lesson here that we can learn from them?
So the high-risk businesses is always one of the, one of the most likely and the most opened clients for the payment industry, because the high risk, of course, it means the high profit, high income, and so on. So we cannot talk about the payments and we cannot talk about the financial industry if we do not consider the high risk industry players like gaming, like pharmaceuticals, and so on. And we have to think how to integrate in these high risk businesses without losses, without risk mitigations and other some important issues. But still there is a gaps. Still, there is a gaps because there is a lot of, for example, gaming companies, casinos, for example, who has no, for example, licenses and other official documents, and still they are operating online. This is maybe one of the first challenges for the regulators, not only for the regulators, but as well for the Visa and for the MasterCard and other payment processors. So, for my opinion, we have to think how the payment systems and how the regulators in this regard can be operate together to create new opportunities for these high-risk businesses, because a lot of casinos, they are just avoiding to get the official license and after that starting cooperating with the payment processors or payment service providers, because they do not want to proceed take some expenses to get the license and officially start working. And still the Visa and MasterCard have some challenges to identify this kind of merchants and this kind of payment service providers which are operating shadowly and avoiding some rules and regulations. And we have to think about it, how we can identify this fair and of course regulate its more flexibility and more acceptable for all parties. Gaming industry, another high-risk industry, and of course payment service providers and regulators.
You think the problem is the regulation or how we are keeping the regulation? Because I believe the regulation already has some kind of blocks towards these companies. And of course, you don't have a license, you shouldn't operate in certain places because then you're straight up illegal. But then do we need more regulation, which is clarifying this even further? Or you think the challenge is keeping this regulation in place and enforcing this regulation? Because oftentimes the payment companies, even though that they know that there are going to be some issues or repercussions of doing it, acting in certain ways, they are still doing it because they are taking the risk of even losing their license. So what I've seen on the market a lot, that many times clients are not even aware of the risk by choosing one payment service provider over another, because it's the ease of onboarding. There are aggregated channels, they take more than they should, and then they unknowingly participating in a payment provider's action which is not following the regulation. And then when things go south, their funds are going to be the one which is also blocked. The funds are being lost or even stolen by these bad actors. So you think it's the regulation which is not that clear, and that's why there are certain bad actors going around? Or is it because we can't simply keep all those regulations because we just don't have eyes everywhere, and the regulator can just only react to the bad actors but not proactively restrict them?
No, I think how we keep this regulation, because I have more liberalistic approach, because I think that the more regulations involves more restrictions, more, less flexibility and so on. It's important how we follow this regulation, how we can adopt this or another kind of regulation to the particular sphere, particular sector, particular process, by the way. I think this is the main moment. We have to adopt already existing regulations in every kind of sector, in every kind of shadowy business. Because, for example, I think there is some gaps by which we can talk with these shadowy businesses, these shadowy, for example, casinos or other companies which are trying to avoid the regulations, and offer them to be a more regulatory in compliance and take less risk. But still, you will have the opportunity, for example, to operate more normally, more, by less stress, by less costs, and so on. So I think that is opportunities and gaps by which we can follow the regulations, by which we can adopt this regulation with the different merchants and different high-risk businesses.
I think with the innovation, we have also the massive risk of bringing in the bad actors, right? Because obviously, if we have something which has been in the place for long years and we regulated it for long years, there are already some creative bad actors who want to avoid the regulation, so then we regulate more. So more or less, we know what we are dealing with. But when we have all these innovative channels, for example, open banking, which is more open to transact funds immediately without having those built-in regulations, regulatory checks. Or even when we are talking the cryptocurrency, right, which was meant to be like a payment method, but then a lot of people started to take advantage of the lack of regulation, and there were unfortunately some bad actors on the market who misused this opportunity. Then we can see, I think, that the regulation is more than necessary, and then we realize that so that's why we over-regulated something, because the same tricks and the same scams are coming over and over again in just a different form, trying to find a way of how to avoid the existing regulation by just using a different technology. So in my opinion, it's yes, regulation is there for a reason, and unfortunately there is something wrong happening, and then the regulation is following it up, and that's why we have more and more regulation, because there are more and more creative ways of trying to cheat the system. But what regulation is too much and what regulation is just too little? How do we filter out the bad actors without actually breaking through the innovation and hindering?
$1 million.
Exactly. So where's the balance? What's the regulation which is too much or too little? Because we got this new question here, which is that what regulatory changes do you anticipate in the new year, and how should businesses adopt their strategies to stay compliant? Because that's what we see. The regulation is changing all the time. There are new and new regulation coming up. Maybe it's choking for new businesses. Maybe it's hindering innovation. Maybe it's over-regulation, where we're talking about Europe. Europe loves to over-regulate everything, obviously. So what's your intake in that? What are the new changes? Are they even necessary? Would you personally bring those regulations? What do you think?
So in recent years, yes, the regulation which can introduce innovation and regulation which will regulate the existing process, we can divide in this moment. For example, for the one hand, new regulation by which you can introduce new services, it's very necessary. It's very, very necessary. It should be introduced. For example, at the current stage in Georgia, we are working at the National Bank of Georgia, working about the new regulations by which payment service providers can register at the National Bank of Georgia and independently open IBAN account. It means that they will be more independent and will be less depending on the commercial banks. They will have opportunity to independently make settlements with Visa, with MasterCard, with international payment service providers, with international banks, and so on. So it means that the payment service providers will be totally have the opportunity to create totally new services and new products for their clients. This is a very first moment. And in this regard, I am totally agree that this kind of regulations we need. And every National Bank of Georgia, every regulator have to think to introduce the regulations by which that will be opportunity to introduce the innovations. This is the very first stage. But there is still some regulations by which you have to control the existing some financial processes. And most likely example is the crypto assets. Yes. In recent years, the crypto companies rapidly developing, and more crypto companies are introducing on the market. Of course, the developing of the market is good. It takes some more revenues, wheels, and so on. But still, there is a risks and challenges by money laundering. And because of that, every regulator regulates the crypto assets and crypto companies in their countries. For example, China is totally restricted the crypto companies, but still there is another companies. For example, in Georgia, 2 years ago, the National Bank of Georgia introduced new rule about the registration and licensing for the crypto companies, and we are very strictly moving forward this regulation and trying to be in compliance in this regulation. So, for example, to get this license from the National Bank of Georgia is a very hard process. It takes some time, approximately 9 months. By the way, it's not easy process, as I already mentioned, and it's very strict, tough regulation. But still, they have the opportunity to move how they moving money. And one of the first methods to move these transfers and move the money is the crypto assets. That's why we need the regulation of the crypto assets. Still, it's can be tough. It can be not very flexible, and of course not very easy to adopt and be in compliance for the crypto companies, but still it's very necessary. And for my opinion, what we can expect from the future about the regulations, definitely more and more crypto regulations, because much more time goes, much more risks takes from the crypto assets and crypto companies, because for the sanctioned countries, there is I would say, only one way to move this money.
You think that eventually crypto becomes regulated as fiat, and since we are using crypto as a fiat, then it just becomes an alternative, let's say, currency, but the regulation is going to be the same? Because in my opinion, it should be, because if it's used like money, if it's being stored like money, then it has to be regulated as money, right? So all of the ideas that my codes, my rules, we are breaking down the banking system, then becomes obsolete, right? Because at the end of the day, there is going to be someone central who is creating these rules and regulations and overseeing the activities of the crypto company. Then what is the real point of having even a crypto other than the fiat currency? Am I wrong? I'm just curious. What do you think about
No, you're right. More, let's take for example, the Visa and MasterCard. Yeah, Visa and MasterCard is only one of the most known international payment processors. But what we have in crypto, at the current stage, we do not have this kind of international payment processor on the crypto. But I am very strongly believe that, for example, USDT, one of the most important and maybe I would say most common adopted cryptocurrency is the USDT, and his provider company Tether, very, very shortly will become first maybe international payment processor, because the adoption as a payment method of the crypto assets and especially the USDT is very, very rapidly developing up. And we can see that in many countries, for example, in Georgia, in Uzbekistan, in Turkey, in Kazakhstan as well, the Tether is already entered. And they have started licensing processes in all these countries. And very soon we will see that the Tether and the USDT will become maybe one of the first internationally adopted cryptocurrency. And in this regard, Tether will become first international payment processor, like Visa, like MasterCard.
And I believe that's going to be the centralized rules and regulations around it, of course. And there's going to be some commonly accepted standards. And then whoever wants to use the Tether has to adhere to all of these centralized rules and regulations. But then what's the point of crypto? What's the whole point of decentralization then, right? So that's a paradox situation here, because the whole idea was that free market and then free flow of funds. But because of these bad actors, we do need to have a central figure who's maintaining the balance, right?
Let's deal with one common thing. That's the existing classical fiat money and commercial banks and even fintechs. It's not more flexible than we need, because the society, for example, merchants, consumers, clients, they need 24-hour flexibility, speed, and so on. And unfortunately, the current existing commercial banks and fiat money system cannot proceed this flexibility. That's why the crypto companies and crypto world in general, they can offer to their customer this flexibility. This is I think the common idea.
So this is the whole point of replacing the whole financial system, right? It's the new digitalized, new version of the current fiat system based on new basis and based on new pillars and new commonly agreed. Exactly. Okay, interesting. Yes, thank you for having this bounce of ideas. What will be the biggest payment and banking challenge businesses will face in the new year, and how they can start preparing it for it now? And I think the new year is being 2025. We talked about regulation, and good luck to all of those companies who are up to date with the latest regulation in all the markets and make sure that they've got all the relevant AML and KYC policies and they even enforce it. But is there going to be any more payment and banking challenges which are new, which you haven't seen, let's say, in the previous years, and it's only going to be the problem this year? And if yes, what are these and how can we deal with them?
So my wish, I will divide this question by two answers. So first, my wish that the commercial banks, regulators, and fintech companies should be more deeply involved in cooperation. And my wish will be for the next year that the commercial banks and fintech companies starting very actively communication and are actively cooperating and creating together new services and products. Unfortunately, it's only my wish, and I'm trying my best in my country to establish this kind of connection. But still, there is, of course, mostly more important challenges and more important issues, which I think in New Year will be faced the new companies, and I think it's regulations. Now, we was talking about the crypto assets and crypto companies, and more regulations are becoming to regulate this sector. And I think that not only particular crypto companies will be faced these regulations, but also the commercial banks and other fintech companies, because as I mentioned, that the crypto assets and crypto payments in particular very actively are developing, and they trying to reach almost every kind of business sector and adopt the crypto payments and other crypto services. So in this regard, other fintech companies, commercial banks have to start preparing how they can not avoid this process, but how they can adopt this process properly and get involved in this process in terms of regulation, of course, in terms of compliance, of course. The crypto companies will develop anyway because they do not have any high dependencies on the commercial bank. Of course, they also need the account in commercial bank, but they have alternative with payment service providers. They can open account with payment service provider and working through this.
And if you snooze, you lose, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't take the risk and you don't have the relevant framework to work according to, then the crypto companies are just simply going to your competition and you're losing the advantage of being able to work with them. So work with them rather than against them, right? That's the bottom line. You mentioned crypto, but I think that we also have to see that what are the challenges for those startups dealing with crypto payments and banking? Because if you have a startup company and let's say you're very innovative, you're getting rejected by different banks or financial providers, and then you reach to crypto. Is it going to be, because in my experience, unfortunately, we've seen it so many times that there was a lot of problem around that. Now you're taking crypto payments. Now you're dealing with crypto. So now you're in a high risk industry, even though that your sector wouldn't justify that. Just from a banking perspective, you turn into a compliance nightmare, and your low risk business of selling e-commerce, immediately an e-commerce dealing with crypto. And that's why whatever was easy at the beginning, it could be a problem later on when you try to find banking and payment partners. What's your experience in that? Shall a startup work with crypto payments and then risk that later on the commercial banks might reject them because of this and take advantage of the crypto opportunity, or it just doesn't worth it? The market is not mature enough that if you've got an e-commerce business, just don't risk anything, work with the traditional providers, and in case that the crypto is going to be more commonly accepted and adopted, that's the only time when you should integrate crypto payments. What do you think about that?
I think every fintech companies and every startup, you have to think how to take these risks, and they have to measure first of all, this risk, which kind of crypto companies they are going to adopt, which kind of crypto methods they are going to adopt, and so on. For example, in Georgia, we have a lot of examples where the fintech companies, especially payment service provider, already adopted the crypto payments and they already integrated in their platforms and in the infrastructure. Of course, this takes some time. Of course, this takes some investments, some, additional and double, checks and regulatory and regulation adoption and communication with regulators and so on.
I think that there is a huge risk also to not jeopardize your current banking relationships, because you mentioned earlier that when you're looking for correspondent accounts or any kind of rails for your fintech business, there are less and less opportunities because the correspondent accounts simply just want to avoid the risk, and they are afraid that if I am getting a bulk transaction without filtering in one by one that which one is a good transaction, which can have a bit of higher risk, then putting the trust in that new financial institution to process all those transactions on my rails, right? Because if something goes wrong, me as a correspondent bank can get the penalty as well. And on top of that, we are adding crypto to this. Would it not mean that financial institution might lose their traditional banking rails? They might jeopardize the trust with the existing banking providers. What do you think? Shall we keep then crypto separately with only channeling those transactions through a crypto-friendly account and bank partner? Or as long as we do everything on our level as a financial institution to filter out everything regarding AML, KYC checks and everything what we can do compliance-wise, then we can actually integrate crypto because it's coming sooner or later anyway, but then maybe face the rejection from our existing correspondent rails, and maybe we find ourselves in a trouble to get new rails. What do you think?
So these risks always exist, and always the commercial banks and corresponding banking always will looking your operations, by which companies you are operating, by which companies you are partnership, and which kind of financial transactions you have. And based on this information, they will take some actions, some close your account or something else. But still, as I mentioned, this is the by default risk. This risk is not only with, for example, dealing with the crypto. In regular life, in regular transaction, fiat transaction, still this risk is exist, and maybe any time commercial bank will call you and told you that, oh, hi, but I don't like this kind of transaction which you are providing, and I have to unfortunately close your account. This risk is always exist. But still, my opinion is that we have to mitigate these risks, and when we are talking about to adopt and integrate crypto solutions in our infrastructure, we have to very carefully measure this company. But for not only this company, but his operations, his license, his reputation, and so on. And it means that you will have a chance to measure the risks, measure the upcoming problems, upcoming issues, and other, for example, opinions from the commercial banks and from the regulators. So definitely, I think the fintech companies and startups should take this risk if they want to develop rapidly, and do not snooze, as you mentioned, because they will definitely lose.
Definitely. And there is always a risk in everything, right? Mainly when you're running a fintech company, then the risk is everywhere.
By the way, a few years ago, when I started working in commercial bank, there was not any, KYC, there was nothing. You can just go to the commercial bank without ID and put the money on your account or another wealth account. What it takes, of course, it takes some risks. Of course, it brings some money laundering and so on. But now we are in the era which we have regulations, which we have some fraud detecting systems, transaction monitoring systems, and so on. And we have almost every kind of chance to track the transaction and track all records. So if we are ready for this, we have to ready with taking new risks and mitigate these risks.
I agree. And there is no innovation without risks, right? So at
Of
the end of the
course,
day,
of
you need
course.
to see what you win in cost of what exactly, and it's very apparent in the financial sector mainly as well.
If you don't
Has,
take a risk, you will not drink the champagne.
that's true. That's true. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Finally, we've got a very personal question, and actually, I'm very curious about that too. That what is your personal achievement of 2024? And I would like you to brag and tell us everything. What was a really good achievement? You mentioned that you're wearing a lot of hats regarding the FinTech Association, and you're lecturing in the university as well as that you're part of the Open Banking Committee. But what was the biggest achievement coming out of that? Because I'm sure that you're working towards reforming the whole financial sector one step at a time, as we do. But what are the achievements that you're the most proud of?
There is a lot of plans, of course, which I am personally trying to reach in 2025. But maybe most important, I would say, to unite all the fintech companies which are now operating in our country. At the current stage, approximately 80% of fintech companies under our umbrella, and they are in our membership. But still, there is some companies, some startups, which we do not have some communication. But I'm sure we will very, very soon offer them to enter in our membership, because we are very strongly believe that our country is not very common with, for example, classical and regular European countries, because in our country, dependency on the commercial banks are, I don't know, totally 100%. Because, for example, all financial products, services, and other relative financial, I don't know, transactions, 80% is under the commercial banks. So my personal achievement and my personal goal to reduce this dependency from the commercial bank and create some kind of alternative financial system by which we can offer to our customer really new, really innovative, really changeable and game changer services. And to reach this goal, only way to unite all fintech companies and bring together these companies under one umbrella and start thinking how we can create alternative financial system in our country. Briefly, this is it.
To create a healthy competition, right? Which is driving innovation and serving the good for the users. Amazing. David, is there something that we haven't talked about, but you feel like that we missed and we definitely need to bring up to the surface?
Oh, I think we have talked a lot. It was very interesting. It was very exciting to talk with you, Viktoria, and I'm always ready and always open to communicate with you. And on our last conversation, as I remember, you promised me to come in Georgia.
Definitely, and it's definitely in the pipeline as well.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking
waiting
forward.
for you, and I will be glad to host you in Georgia and represent and present to our ecosystem with our main players. And of course, one of the most delicious cuisine in all around the world.
Amazing. I can't wait. I'm sure that there are going to be a lot of opportunity to present for your members as well, the Institute and the goal that we are trying to achieve, which is an ethical and transparent industry. I think we are both fighting for the same thing, but with different tools and with different angles. But the goal is the same, is to make this industry a safe and transparent industry for everyone, not only for the users, but of course for the fintech companies as well, and help regulators how to improve the innovation and help the innovation other than the regulator, which is working against the innovation, because that's good for not only for the society and the economy, but obviously for the users as well. As we said, that we try to make everything more transparent and more trustworthy for everyone who is involved. So we'll definitely watch this space, because there's going to be a lot of interesting event association with the FinTech Association here in Georgia, and there's going to be a lot of new interesting content which is coming up, and educational series. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. David, if someone has still some question, where do we find you? How do we reach you? And can we even bug you with all those questions?
Of course. Anytime, anywhere. So my email address is already mentioned. Also, any person can reach me via LinkedIn and other social networks. David Kikvidze. Please, my friends, feel free to anytime contact me, communicate with me, chat with me. I'm open and we'll be glad to hear from you and discuss opportunities, your questions, and other related topics.
Well, definitely. I'm sure that there are a lot of questions which are still unanswered because we only had 1 hour. But thank you so much, David, for being here with us. I think it was really exciting to see your perspective and see your work towards making this industry a better one. Thank you very much for your work. And I would like to encourage everyone to feel free to reach out to David, reach out to us, and help us to develop more valuable content, which is helping your real life work and cases. And looking forward in the future towards a more unified industry. So thank you so much for everyone who was here with us in the webinar. Thank you very much, David, and see you soon.
Thank you, Victoria. See you soon, and thank you once again for your invitation and really exciting discussion. Thank you.